I'll let you know when it's on the YouTube. And we're live.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 12th, 2021 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Miklick, Councillor and Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. We are meeting electronically through Zoom during this declared emergency period. Members of the public may observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast at our YouTube channel. I will ask our clerk to complete a roll call of council so that we can confirm quorum. Devan, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Miklick. Mayor Easton?
Present.
Councillor Rajima?
Present.
Councillor Russell?
Here.
Councillor Brunei?
Here.
Councillor Pachariva?
Here.
Councillor McPherson?
Here.
Councillor Miklick?
I'm here.
Councillor Timmers?
Here.
Councillor Reimer?
Here.
Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you very much. In addition, I would like to take a moment to welcome the staff we have joining us today electronically. We have our CAO, Mike Kirkopoulos, Director of Finance, Administration and Innovation, Lawrence Wagner, Associate Director of Finance and Administration, Terry Twirlwala, Director of Special Projects, Kathleen Dale, Director of Planning and Development, Matt Bruder, Manager of Municipal Bylaw Enforcement, Mike Barkway, Director of Community Services, Shannon McKay, Associate Director of Recreation and Culture, Sarah Ain, Director of Economic Development and Communications, Paul Deaney, Director of Public Works, Dave Graham, Manager of Engineering Services, Walter Neubauer, Manager of Environmental Services, Jillian Harris, Town Clerk, Julie Kirklos, Legislative and Committee Coordinator, Aaron Plant, and moderating and clerking the meeting today, we have our Deputy Clerk, Devan. IT staff are also in attendance. As this is a virtual meeting, I will ask that we follow some procedures during this electronic meeting. Should there be a connection or a service disruption for the chair, or if quorum is lost, the chair and or clerk will call a 10-minute recess to reconnect and regain quorum. If quorum is lost, the meeting will be adjourned. If connection is lost from the chair, the clerk will ask those in attendance to wait up to 10 minutes to provide the chair time to reconnect and resume the meeting. Otherwise, after that time frame, the vice chair will resume the meeting until the chair has reconnected and resumes their role. Each member of council who wishes to speak, please press the raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk will track our speakers list today and then invite you to speak when I open it for comments or questions. Also, when I finish reading the motion and announcing the mover, the clerk will then call out the vote by reading each member of council's name out loud. Please remember to take yourselves off mute during this portion of the meeting so that you can confirm if you support or oppose. Also, when not speaking, please remember to put yourself on mute. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Do not see any. Statutory public meetings. We have no statutory public meetings today. Although there are no public statutory meetings occurring for this evening's Committee of the Whole meeting, staff have established procedures for public to participate at future meetings. Information is available on our town website, and any future notices of public meetings will also provide directions on how the public can participate. So we've reached our Planning and Economic Development Committee of agenda. Delegations. There are no registered delegations this evening for the Planning and Economic Development Committee of agenda. Consent agenda. We are now considering item 5.2 consent agenda, inclusive of item 5.2.1 Municipal Heritage Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of February 11th, 2021. Would any member of council like to remove the item from the consent agenda to discuss? There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers that council receive and file for information under consent agenda inclusive of item 5.2.1 Municipal Heritage Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of February 11th, 2021. I will now ask our clerk to call upon the vote.
Thank you, Chair Micklick. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Micklick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Very good. 5.3 reports. We will now consider item 5.3.1, report PD-24-21, public nuisance bylaw. Do members of council have any questions? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess I'll kick this off. First of all, thank you to Mr. Barkway and Mr. Bruder for bringing this important proposed bylaw forward. It is a bylaw that we know that's been a couple of years in the making, lots of public meetings, lots of public input, and very pleased to see it on the agenda tonight. I do have three questions, Mr. Chair, if I may, or if you'd like me to go back into the rotation to ask the third one, I'll leave that with you. My first question is with regards to OMAFRA, the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and their role in this bylaw. And I guess it's I know the bylaw is a lot of things. It's not just cannabis, but you know, the question is primarily focused at the cannabis piece here and the odors and light with regards to how it applies to the cannabis industry in Lincoln. So my question is, do we have OMAFRA's support with this bylaw, this proposed bylaw? Through you, Mr. Chair, probably to Mr. Barkway.
We'll start with Mr. Barkway, and if Mr. Bruder should have further comments, we welcome them too. So go ahead, Mr. Barkway.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The question in regards to OMAFRA's involvement, or if they have accepted this bylaw, OMAFRA is a separate entity. So we have included within the bylaw the recognition of normal farm practice, which falls within OMAFRA. I've had communication with members of OMAFRA in relation to agricultural operations, which is actually defined within the bylaw as well. OMAFRA has criteria that they look at when they are determining whether or not the subject property involved would be an agricultural operation before they would have any involvement in making a decision. If OMAFRA is involved, what they hope happens first is that there is some sort of mediation at the municipal or municipal jurisdiction level. So if there's a nuisance, if there's a complaint of a nuisance and it relates to an agricultural property, they would hope that first there would be some attempts made at the municipal level to try and come to some sort of understanding or agreement or mediate something to deal with the issue. If not, then somebody needs to be willing to front a request to OMAFRA through the normal Farm Practices Protection Act to request a hearing in order for OMAFRA to be involved. And then they would look at whether the operation is an agricultural operation, and B, whether the things that are taking place on the property that a person or people are complaining about as a nuisance, if it falls within normal farm practice and therefore would be granted normal farm practices protection under their act. For that to happen, the agricultural property first has to be deemed to be agricultural, which means there must be a gain or reward that is seen on that property, on the agricultural property. To put that into kind of a more relatable term, somebody that has a garden in their backyard, just because they grow some tomatoes or some beans or whatever, that doesn't necessarily make them a farmer. There has to be some sort of gain or reward in order for MAFRA to recognize them as being an agricultural operation. And then the steps they take, as long as they're adhering to policy and procedure, would be guarded and protected under the Normal Farm Practices Protection Act.
Counselor?
So, Mr. Chair, if I could follow up on that particular item. So, to clarify, if we have an odor issue at a cannabis facility, and we go through the process, the process of vetting out the potential offense against the bylaw. Is there a point in that process that I would say probably agricultural facility can lean on OMAFRA to support them in challenging our bylaw?
MAFRA wouldn't step in to challenge the bylaw. Well, MAFRA would then be able to speak to the normal farm practices portion of it only, because in agricultural operations there are times when some of the processes done within an agricultural property to some people could be determined to be a nuisance. And as these happen regularly within agricultural areas, OMAFRA has set up that hearing board in order to try to weigh out or fetter out the common nuisance complaints that would come up in farming practices that are just part of farming life and farming practice. And although they try to mitigate things by putting things in place, there's only so much an agricultural operation can do to mitigate issues before it's something that the surrounding area needs to be able to just accept or handle to a certain degree. Also, the OMAFRA would never step in and try and strike down a bylaw, but OMAFRA would have the ability to say that can't be received as a nuisance and perceived as a nuisance, where they could be charged because it constitutes a normal farm practice to begin with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barkway. I'm going to move on to the next question, and my next.
Sorry, Counselor, I see Matt Bruder's hand is up. He may be able to add some further info or insight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just regards to normal farm practices. When we drafted up the bylaw, we tried to recognize, that there is those normal farm practices. But, when you're talking, and we'll go along the same vein, Councillor McPherson, for your example with cannabis odors. I think, when something's repetitive, and going past the typical harvest seasons, and there's a constant impact, it goes beyond what a normal farm practice would be. And I would also just comment too that just from an overall standpoint, in terms of trying to mitigate some of these impacts, I know recently Health Canada has launched a public consultation effort where they're looking to obtain input on what they're looking at in terms of more control for things such as medicinal grows and subjecting them to the same types of odor mitigation and other mitigation that the federally licensed producers are subject to. So I think that you're seeing some movement there too, in terms of recognizing a little bit of a separation here between what a typical normal farm practice is and what these operations are resulting in terms of impacts. I just wanted to add those pieces. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bruder, for that added comment. So my second question is, And it's with regards to the process. And in the report, it talks about when a call is received or a complaint is received, the officer would identify the property in question and attend on several occasions. So I'm wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Barkway, if you can't walk us through what does that look like? You know, if we are receiving a complaint, and I'm again specific to odor. If we are receiving a complaint on odor, what does that process look like for our resident to understand the various steps that are involved in moving through to a action, let's say, just an action of some kind? If you could, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. When a complaint is received by my office, it would be reviewed, and then it would be assigned to one of the officers to investigate. The officer would, as normal practice, would try to make a determination of the area that's involved. If we're talking about an odor complaint in this circumstance, they would not be able to necessarily, by the complaint on its own, say that it's this property or X property or Y property. So that's why it's built into the bylaw that the investigating officers would make several attendances, different times of the day or the evening, noting different climate factors, environment factors, because if it's an odor, it's something that will be moved or controlled by wind speed, direction as well. So the point of reception would be from the complainant, the person who's making the complaint about the odor. That would be the first place the officer would probably go to and attend, speak to the complainant, and then see if they can if they can smell that odor that's being complained about from that location or not. And regardless of whether they can or they cannot, based on when the complaint comes in and when they can get to the property, they would make other attempts in the area to see if they can detect the odor as well. They would go to different locations depending on where the wind's blowing, the direction of the wind. They would want to be downwind to try and pick up the odor and see if they can make some gains into identifying the property that would be involved. Once that's done, or they're satisfied that they've identified the property in question, that would mean that they've substantiated that there is odor coming from a property. They would identify the property, try to make the determination about who the owner of the property is, and then they would make contact with the property themselves, explaining the situation, that there's a complaint, that there is an odor coming from the property, and they make some inquiries as to what the practice is that's going on there. The officer has several authorities within the bylaw that are granted through the Municipal Act in regards to attending on the property at a reasonable time frame, with some notice, and being able to enter the property and to cause an inspection to take place as well. That would be to make a determination of what, if any, practices are in place to mitigate such issues as the nuisance odor or what have you in this case. And that can be done by the officer themselves, or it can be done by the officer with another person who may be more adept at making a determination if it has something to do with a filtration system, odor control and mitigation. Somebody could go in there and look at the system and make sure it's functioning well, that it's the proper type or size for the operation that's going on at that time. That investigation would continue. At some point, the officer, if it's determined or substantiated that there is a odor nuisance going on, and it's from a operation as opposed to a single residence, then the officer can issue an order, and that order would set out what the offense is, so the nuisance odor or the obnoxious odor, and it would set out a time frame for compliance, and that would be based on several factors, even taking into account where we are with the pandemic at this point in regards to getting technicians in to actually deal with the issue or to look at it or try to make changes. The minimum time that we have on an order is 15 days. So it could be anywhere from 15 days, or depending on what it is that might be involved, the officer could make a determination to allow for more time for that to take place, 30 days, 35 days, whatever's within reason. And during that time, the officer can carry on with the property owner and see what steps are being taken to mitigate the problem, what they're doing. We have had times in the past with other instances where there's orders issued where the property owner is then getting close to the compliance date and they are unable to fulfill it by the compliance date. If they can satisfy the officer or my office that they are taking reasonable steps to advance towards mitigating the issue, they can be granted extended periods of time beyond the compliance date to try and get that done. If there's a failure to comply, we have the option of laying a charge under Part 3 summons for fail to comply with an order, and that would take it to court with a trial date. And there's also the actual charge that would take it to court under a summons. OMAFRA would be contacted as well if we have to make a determination whether or not it's an agricultural operation, because that would set it into a separate direction as well. And once it gets to the point where there's a charge laid, that takes it right into the provincial offenses court, and then the provincial prosecutor would be involved. And there is no set fine when there's a Part 3 summons. It's directly to court, and they coordinate either a resolution prior to a trial date or there's a trial involved, and then the provincial prosecutor would then be requesting a fine based on the entire operation. The maximum fine for a first offense is $5,000 for an individual, $10,000 for a corporation, and when it's a repeated offense, those fines go up substantially, both for the individual or for a corporation. And every day that there's a continuation of the offense is actually deemed under the Provincial Offences Act as a separate offense. So technically, the officer could go back 2 days later if it's still going on, lay another charge or another Part 3 summons, and have another court date. At some point, they would probably take all those the individual separate charges and compile them into one and have one court date and answer to and speak to all the charges at one time.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, and just a final comment. Thank you, Mr. Barkway. That makes it much clearer. I guess my comment would be, it's a process. It's not a silver bullet where the smell is noticed on a Sunday and it's fixed on a Monday. This is a process, right? This is going to take some time, probably going to take even a number of separate complaints coming from residents, possibly on the same facility, if it happens to be that way. But I think you've made that very clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll swing back in after other questions have been asked.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next, I believe we have Councillor Russell. Perfect. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to either Mr. Barkway or Mr. Bruder. My question is along the cannabis lines, but it's more about personal use and or personal growth at a home, as it can be sensitive to some residents surrounding those homes that do partake. Just wondering, do the same requirements follow suit in the bylaw as opposed to a commercial outfit?
So Councillor Russell, you're speaking to personal consumptions, let's say in the backyard?
Backyard, garage, whatever it might be. Again, it might be a sensitive issue to a neighbor next door, and just wondering if the same rules and processes apply.
Mr. Barkway?
Thank you, through you, Chair. If you're speaking about somebody that's actually like smoking cannabis, then no, that would be no different than somebody having a cigar in their backyard or making popcorn or what have you. The odor bylaw wouldn't, because that would be trifling in nature. It would it would not be there for any consistent period of time. If it's something that's happening all the time, unfortunately, our hands are tied in regards to enforcement of a nuisance bylaw when it's a lawful act. So somebody smoking, as long as they're not doing it in the doorway of somebody's house, I think you would look at it more along the lines of the smoking bylaw that's in effect in the Niagara region. Somebody in a parking lot of a business can't smoke within 9 meters of an entrance or exit way to any other businesses. The same sort of, not that we have that per se in our bylaw, but same thing, it's smoking. So you can't do that within a certain period of a public place, entranceway or anything. Same thing with a campfire with the smoke billowing into somebody's window. That's something we can speak to people about. But somebody having a cigarette or smoking a cannabis cigarette, that's not going to be something where we're going to be dealing with it under the odor nuisance. No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barkway. Mr. Chair, through you, just one quick follow-up on that. What about the personal growth? I believe that residents are allowed up to 4 plants in their backyard. Would that apply?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The odor from marijuana plant takes place at the flowering stage of the plant itself. 4 plants in a person's backyard for personal grow is allowed. The federal government has recognized that people are allowed to do that, and a plant such as a marijuana plant growing in a small area like that, it would be hard pressed for us to then take the homeowner to a charge and have them go to court for growing 4 plants in their backyard. It's magnified when you're talking about a growing operation of 1,500 plants or 10,000 plants. But when you're talking about 4 plants, although the order may not be appreciated by everybody, it would be no different than having a mustard plant in your backyard, or I'll like it to being in an agricultural area, a rural area, and there's a field and there's stinkweed growing. Yeah, very similar smell to marijuana, but it's not an odor offense. It's just an unfortunate odor at that point. So 4 plants will not constitute.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, my last question. I believe I get 3.
Quick.
Yep. My question is about the light issue. How will bylaw be measuring what is a nuisance light? Again, we've had a lot of questions and concerns about where areas like King Street and Ontario Street, where residential and commercial are kind of blended together. How will bylaw measure what is a light nuisance and what isn't?
Mr. Barkway?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Good question. So light trespass, as we have it in the bylaw, would be such that it would be light being illuminated from a luminaire that enters onto a neighboring property or residence, and would then have an effect on the people inside their home or outside their home in their backyard. I would give an example of a property where there's behind their backyard is a parking lot of a business of some kind, and they have floodlights in their back in the parking lot. Up till now, we haven't been able to deal with issues like that, where it's illuminated and it's coming into the windows of the resident's home. The best that we could do up until we've drafted this bylaw is to try and do some sort of mediation between the residents and the business involved to try and come to some sort of resolution where we had no authority to make something happen. We were just trying to work with both sides to try and find a happy medium. This bylaw will give us the opportunity to attend at the address where the people are complaining about it and make a determination, not based on any type of measuring devices, but a unbiased third party who attends and looks and sees whether the illumination from X property is disturbing or would be deemed to be causing a nuisance to the property where the complainant is coming from. And it has to be more than just it's a bright light. It has to be coming onto the property, entering onto the property. Generally, we'd probably be looking to see if it's causing something into encroaching through the backyard and into the back of the house or the front of the house or the side house in through windows where it can be seen. That would be where we would say that most likely that would be a nuisance and we would carry forward with it. Doesn't mean necessarily somebody needs to be charged or a property owner needs to be charged. We would still make those attempts to reach out to the other property and try and speak to them and sort of work towards a resolution or help them with some lighting mitigation, whether it's a redirecting of the light or focusing of the light or some sort of bracket or maybe a different type of light that they could probably install. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Who do we have next, Devane?
We have Councillor Reimer.
Councillor Reimer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mikulek. Thank you to Mike and to Matt and staff for this bylaw. Just two clarifications. Councillor McPherson touched on it briefly. I'm just going to come at it from a different angle. Cannabis is still, for the sake of this bylaw, cannabis is still considered by OMAFRA like an agricultural practice. The cultivation of cannabis is still considered an agricultural practice. I know at the time we did our cannabis bylaw, there was some talk that it might have its own class or classification, but in here it still falls under that normal farm practice. To Mike or to Matt, sorry, to Mike or to Matt.
We'll start with Mr. Barkway, and if Mr. Bruder has anything further to add, we'll go to Mr. Bruder. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. OMAFRA right now has not come out and said yay or nay in regards to cannabis cultivation operations. What they do recognize right now is hemp, the growing of hemp and hemp farms. They recognize that as a normal, as an agricultural operation. My understanding is right now that there is another municipality that has taken OMAFRA to task to try and get them to finally take that stance one way or the other in regards to cannabis operations, but they have not at this point. So they look at everything as a one-off.
Okay, all right, thank you. And one other, just to clarify, on page number, in Appendix A, page number 6, under odor nuisances, we've got exemptions. Number 12 is exemptions. I would assume this includes manure, compost spreading, great compost, chicken barn cleaning, all that type of stuff, those type of odors. Is that's in those, that covers that? To Mike or to Matt, sorry.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I can
Go ahead, Mike.
I can answer that. Yes, manure spreading, chicken barns, poultry barns, they have, not that they would refer to that, but they do have case law on those that they've gone through and had hearings on those before. So they'd be able to speak to those very quickly, that would be a normal farm practice, as long as they're adhering to the restrictions that they normally would have in place in an agricultural operation like that.
Yeah, okay, well, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Mikulek.
Thank you. Mr. Barkway, that includes those biodigesters?
Sorry, Chair, could you repeat that?
That includes those biodigesters that generate hydro or generate energy?
Unless Matt can help me with that, I'm not really sure. That's something I would have to look into.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, further, I'd have to do the same. I don't believe that it does cover those, but like I'd have to confirm.
Okay. Who do we have next, Deputy Clerk? I think it might be, that's all the questions, Councillor Reimer? You're satisfied? Okay. I believe it might be Councillor Ringema. We lost connection.
You're right.
Go ahead, Councillor Ringema.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I did. I got kicked out for a little while, so I missed. Unfortunately, I missed a lot of the. Yeah, I know it was me. It's my laptop. Wasn't charging properly and it died. So it's working now. And I missed a bit of the discussion, quite a bit of the discussion about with Councillor McPherson's questions. So I won't ask you to repeat any of it. I got the gist of it. I believe that people are concerned that farm practices are treated as they should be, and that's with respect and recognition that council has placed this as definitely one of our priorities, that we support agriculture and we protect the rights of farmers to do business, and rightly so. My question actually is further to Councillor Russell's question about lighting. So for example, if there was a commercial development and they had gone through a site plan process, then lighting, I'm assuming, would be addressed during that site plan process. So moving forward, will bylaw be consulted during that site plan process, just to make sure that there's communication regarding the type of lighting that's going on, where the lighting is facing, etc. Is that how we plan to handle it in the future, the process?
So I believe that's a planning question from the implementation of a site plan agreement. We'll let Mr. Bruder address that question to start.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, no, good question for sure. And when we get into site lighting, we already look at that extensively through the site plan process on any application, those out in the rural areas, greenhouses, agricultural processing, things like that. We always require, as part of the site plan submission, a drawing called a photometrics plan. And what that is that shows you, based on the level in which the light hits the ground, the intensity of it throughout the site. And what we look for, it's a bunch of numerical values on a plan, and we look for those to, once they get past the subject lands, the property line, they go to 0, meaning there's no trespass on adjacent lands. So definitely already a consideration, something we look at more on the development engineering side of things. But yeah, definitely already included in our site plan processes even to date.
Okay, so a question of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So any existing development I just want to sort of paraphrase what you said. So any development that might be in the process of being built right now that had gone through the site plan process, then lighting and its effect on neighboring properties has been taken into consideration.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. Next, we have Deputy Mayor Timmers.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Barkway. Thank you for the report. It's a great report. I have a question. I think Councillor McPherson kind of covered off a lot around cannabis odor. What about backyard fires? And I'm sorry if you've said this already, but smoke from backyard fires, that people can't have their windows open. You know, they have to close their windows. Where does that fall? Is there anything that could be addressed there?
Mr. Barkway.
For you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, or Deputy Mayor, sorry. Twofold for that. Yes, under the nuisance bylaw, that could come into effect with the odor portion, but also already through the fire burning permit process, that would already be addressed. There are strict guidelines in regards to fire burning, whether it be in a backyard or an agricultural location or a rural setting, in regards to smoke and being a nuisance to neighboring properties. So it could be looked at under both.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question around lighting. You know, over the years, I've heard comments, and there was an email today again about a specific location where there's light pollution, light that happens all night, every night, that lights up our entire town. This is not a business that requires lighting for growing. I'm just wondering, what do we have in our bylaw to address something like that when the entire town can see it? people nearby, it's like they have no nighttime. It's affecting our environment. It's affecting animals. It's affecting the rural areas. What can we do around something like that?
Through you, Chair.
Barkway?
Thank you for the question. If it's not a trespass, a lighting trespass issue, it would still be deemed to be a nuisance. However, I would be referring things like that to, or concerns like that, I would be conferring with Minister of the Environment to weigh in as well in regards to in situations like that, because we're talking more of a light pollution as opposed to a nuisance to a neighboring property or residence. I would think that the MOE would have more to do with that than a municipal bylaw, but it is something I can look into more for sure.
Yeah, and if people are trying to sleep and their entire house is lit up where they could read, that is a nuisance. However, it's not directly shining on their property. It's just the entire night sky is lit. So straight to the Ministry of Environment, it sounds like.
Through you, Chair, if it's coming into their house, then it would be a trespass.
Okay.
If it's just that they can see a bright light in the sky from where they're sitting in their backyard, that would not necessarily be a lighting trespass, but that could be something that could be a concern for the environment itself.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mayor Easton, I see your hand is up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Staff, thank you very much for this report. It has a lot of moving parts. The protracted nature of the process, I'm sure for anybody that's observing tonight, must be quite a concern. It's certainly a concern for me. So let me just start with an item that was brought up earlier, and then I have a question about legal versus illegal. The issue of lagoons, biodigesters, composting facilities, is it necessary for us to include all of those eventualities in this bylaw in order to put people on notice that if they want to establish these things in the town of Lincoln, that there are already laws in place to govern them?
Mr. Bruder, I believe this question is to you.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chair. Your Worship, I think that's totally accurate. I think that is something that should be included. And we look at those two things like biodigesters and things like that, even from a planning standpoint. There can be compatibility issues there as well that staff are always cognizant of when we have things like this on the horizon. So, this bylaw coupled with those considerations, I would think would be an effective way forward in dealing with them as we go forward from here.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Also, Mr. Barkway, it really sounds like the whole idea of smell is quite subjective. Is that right?
Mr. Barkway?
Through you, Chair. Yes, Your Worship. It is odor is a very subjective issue. You are correct.
Okay, so am I correct in the processing of the case study that you gave us? That first of all, we have to establish if this is a legal operation. Is that the first thing that we have to establish when you get a phone call about smell?
Mr. Barkley?
Through you, Chair. The first thing we would try to determine is where the smell is coming from. If there is a smell, we would need to substantiate it. And that's the reason for the suggested more than one visit to the area to try and make those determinations. And then identifying what the property is. During that process, there would have to be attempts made to determine what's going on the property and whether that is supposed to be happening on that property. That would be for the safety of the officers that are conducting the investigation, as well as just foreknowledge for the investigation moving forward, to know whether or not it's something where we need to have the Niagara Regional Police involved, or whether it's something that's more dealt with just on a municipal level through bylaw.
Okay, all right. Well, what is our plan then, through you, Mr. Chair? In conjunction with that question, what is our plan then for, are we going to be operating strictly from on a complaint basis? Or do we plan to actually have bylaw officers traveling through the entire town, searching out places to establish what is legal and what is illegal? And I'm asking this question, Mr. Barkway, because I'm trying to remove the responsibility and the onerous responsibility from the shoulders of our citizens in dealing with these complaints. And I've made the suggestion before that we may want to invest in having dogs who are trained to search out these locations. And I'm quite serious about it, because I do not want to see the citizens of Lincoln as carrying the full responsibility, or really any appreciable responsibility, for other people's aberrant behavior. So what do you have to say about that? You see dogs on the horizon?
Mr. Barkway?
For you, Chair. Thank you. No, I don't see bylaw or having contracted canine going throughout the municipality searching for this. The way the thought process behind this is it's a nuisance bylaw. As such, it would have to be something that there would need to be a complaint for this to be started. Otherwise, we're acting outside of a public nuisance portion of the bylaw if we're proactively trying to find these things. And if it's in regards to determining whether or not something is a legal operation or an illegal operation, if it's an illegal operation, bylaw would be a peripheral to a criminal investigation that would take place by the local police department. If it's a legal operation, then bylaw could conduct their investigation accordingly in regards to the odor or lighting nuisance that's happening. But no, I'm not anticipating my officers are going to be driving around stopping on every street corner looking for smells. It would be something that is more or less a complaint-driven issue.
Okay, so if it doesn't come under this bylaw, then the issue of legal or illegal doesn't primarily come under this bylaw. Then what bylaw does it come under?
Legal in terms of the scent or the odor?
The growing.
The growing, okay. Mr. Barkway?
Through you, Chair. If there are licensed growers on the property and they are conforming to the restrictions placed within their license, then it would be a legal operation as long as it's conforming to what we have within the official plan and zoning. If it's an illegal operation, they're not conforming to the standards and the restrictions placed within their license, or they haven't adhered to what's within our zoning bylaws and what's in place, then although there is a municipal portion to the enforcement, the criminal portion would be taking priority in regards to dealing with the property or the people registered to the property.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, my third question then relates to the issue of the criminal part. And that is the process that you described earlier on. I think it was in response to Councillor McPherson's question. It was, I think case studies are quite informative. Just would that process, that rather protracted process, be what the community could expect when it was determined that there's a criminal operation in place? Mr. Barclay.
Through you, Chair. A criminal investigation is a separate investigation to what would be done by the municipality. There would be ongoing communication between my office and the police department, but the police criminal investigation would be kept separate and arm's length from anything that the municipality is doing.
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't know whether we're in a position where we could make a list of the benefits that we're going to be seeing with this new bylaw. I think the staff have done a tremendous amount of work. Really, it's coming down to a matter of how much power are we going to have at the municipal level when it comes to dealing with illegal growth. And then, you know, I think we talked at one time about actually seeing what additional buttons we could push as a municipality in order to demonstrate that there will be zero tolerance. I don't want to get into a discussion about things that have nothing to do with this bylaw, but this is not, I'm not leaving this discussion feeling that the provincial and federal governments have left us with a great deal to work with. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I do believe we have zoning bylaws in effect that the town staff can lean on for enforcement. If there's suspected illegal activity, I'm sure bylaw enforcement would work with various levels of enforcement agencies, Niagara Regional, OPP, RCMP, similar to they have in the past. I think what we're working on here is the actual odor, the nuisance odor itself. Perhaps it may allow bylaw officers entry into these facilities, which may trigger further alarms. But for the moment, I think we're, for the most part, dealing with the nuisance odors piece of any business, not just cannabis, which seems to be the majority of conversation, but for any business for that matter. Mr. Bruder, am I correct in what I'm saying?
I think so generally, Mr. Chair. I mean, when it comes to our zoning bylaw, it kind of depends on what exactly it is that's going on the site and what the land use permissions are. But yeah, like in terms of the multidisciplinary and multi-agency approach that you were highlighting, most definitely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Councillor McPherson, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing a second question. And this may help a little bit with the mayor's final comments there. My question is around the penalty piece of it and the fines that are on page 22 of the agenda. And my question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Barkway is, you made a comment earlier in one of my questions with regards to if it's a business or if it's a personal residence. So can I take from that if it's a business, these fines do not apply, and that we go down the road of a different road, more of a legal, road, if you will? Am I interpreting that incorrectly? And if it is still the fine piece of it, if businesses, particularly, and again, I get stuck on the cannabis piece because there's lots of cannabis questions that we face. I think we all face in town here. So the whole $500 fine for obnoxious odor or light trespass, the $500 fine for some of these businesses would be potentially looked at as a cost of doing business. So if we are fining these businesses, at what point does it escalate to a level that the business will stand up and take notice?
Mr. Barclay, question around fines and their effectiveness or their amounts.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. The proposed fines and the fines that, or the court process that can take place there's two parts to this that I will answer. There are no set fines that are set with this bylaw at this point. There's a proposal that if this bylaw is passed, then I, on behalf of the municipality, will then send a proposal of a set fine schedule to the Ministry of the Attorney General's office, and they review that, look at surrounding municipalities and jurisdictions as well, and make a determination of whether or not the fines are valid, if they're reasonable, and then if they are, then they would enact them and put them in force applicable to the bylaw. In regards to whether there is a fine issued by way of a provincial offense notice, which would commonly known as a Part 1, or whether there is a charge laid which directs a person or a corporation to court for a court hearing, that would be determined based on the expanse of the investigation, the seriousness of the investigation. If we're talking about a neighbor on a neighbor, a residence on a residence type of thing with a light trespass or an odor, that would be done through a set fine. If there can't be any sort of resolution, then there could be a fine laid with a provincial offense notice, which would be a Part 1, so a set fine of $500. If it's something where it's a business and it's an ongoing thing and there's mitigation issues for either odor or lighting, then that would not be an appropriate time to lay a provincial offense notice. That would be done through a Part 3 summons, which would direct the individual or the corporation directly to court, and then the fines would be administered through the provincial offenses court, and they can be for a first-time offense on an individual up to $5,000, for a corporation up to $10,000, and then they increase exponentially with every second, third, fourth offense that could take place, possibly with anything under the Provincial Offences Act, not just with this bylaw.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brockway, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bruder, I see your hand is up. You have further comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments about that. As Mr. Barkway stated, with some of these corporations, these businesses that go to a Part 3 summons, what the important thing is how we build the case that goes before the court. That's why in some cases, being proactive, it's not quite a great fit, because you have to build a case over time. You have to show that there's been some efforts required to, or undertaken to, address the issue at hand. The whole point being, once you do get to court down the line, what your main goal is you want to be able to obtain a conviction and get a positive charge, because that opens the door later. If there are repeat offenses, there's the potential there to for some more significant penalties. So that's kind of the course of action of these things as you go forward too. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. So I don't see any further hands up in the air. Just wanted to say this has certainly been an interesting discussion. Quite a bit discussed. Most of you are thinking along the same lines as I'm thinking. I don't feel I have any further questions to add. The only thing I would say is that I'm impressed with our staff at all levels on this. Since we've been dealing with nuisance odors and trying to come up with a nuisance odor bylaw, we've been we're a small town that's thinking big, and we're trying to come up with solutions that are that will work for the people of Lincoln. And I'm liking this, what I've been seeing, and I'm liking the discussion that we've had. This bylaw that we've come up with here, this public nuisance bylaw, I mean, I have to say it covers everything from laser lights in the backyard to knocked over porta potties to greenhouses growing smelly stuff. So I think this bylaw, it's quite impressive what it covers and what we've attempted here. So I don't see there being no further discussion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva. Council enact and pass proposed public nuisance bylaw attached as Appendix A. I will now ask our clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair McLick. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor McLick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Councillor Russell?
Yes,
Councillor Russell.
sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Timmers
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you very much, members of council. There being no further additional reports to consider for the Planning and Economic Development Committee of Agenda, we now have concluded the agenda. Will now rotate to Councillor and Chair Paul McPherson to assume the chair at this time for the General Business and Finance Committee of Agenda. Councillor
Thank you,
McPherson.
Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. 6.1 delegations. There are no registered delegations this evening for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. Item 6.2 consent agenda. There are no consent agenda items this evening for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We move to 6.3 reports. We will now consider item 6.3.1, report FN-09-21 2020 year-end financial report. Our Director of Finance, Administration and Innovation will be providing a presentation regarding the report. Lawrence, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Councillor, and I'm happy to present this evening to Council. And just as a point of order, both Terry and I will be providing the update or the year-end financial update to Council. So I'm hoping that's okay as well. Devin, can you bring up the slide, please?
Madam Clerk, can you see my screen?
Yep. So next slide, Aaron. So tonight's presentation will cover off the financial status for the period ending December 31st, 2020, which will include the town's fiscal year-end fiscal health, its projected savings or pressures, and I'm proud to say that you have some surplus from last year and our next steps. This is a preliminary report. We really do not expect a lot of changes. There are still some final minor adjustments that need to be done, closing up books, adjusting for accrual entries and such. Our final financial results, which will include the audited financial statements, will be presented to Council in July. Going forward, you can expect to see more regular financial updates in the same fashion. They will include an accompanying memo, supporting documents, financial tables and such, which will help inform Council of our financial position as a town. In our quarterly reports, you'll see in-year savings or pressures. Ideally, in the same discussion, we'll provide you with approaches to deal with any changes in our financial position or picture. We'll be providing you, I know there's been questions about our procurements and our procurement processes. We're going to be providing more updates on our large procurements that are falling outside the normal fair and transparent process, meaning exception-based. So we want to have full disclosure and be fair, transparent on that. As you know, some of you know that we are in the process of recruiting a business analyst. We'll also be including in the quarterly updates our IT capital project updates or project status to ensure that there's some accountability to what we've committed to deliver on our IT project front. Next slide, Aaron, please. So as I said, the year-end financial reporting information will touch on most of these items. It'll focus on year-end financial results. It'll focus on net changes in revenue in year and year over year, net changes in expenditures in year or year over year. It'll have some narrative regarding each of the areas, savings or pressures. It'll also have an update or summary on the major public infrastructure projects. So we've had a lot of capital projects closed this year, and we have a lot still underway, but we want to provide you some of those updates with this presentation. Next slide, Aaron. So as I said, we have some positive results. Our year-to-date actual revenue as of December 2020 with the fiscal year complete, the town is projecting to end up with more revenues than budget. It was a difficult year, but if you think about it, we ended up having some additional support. We had 1.5 million from the Safe Restart Agreement for COVID and 335,000 to offset 2019 flooding costs. These help mitigate some of our pressures or additional costs or additional declines in revenue, such as our user fee and service charges. As you know, our recreation programs were closed. Our licensing and permit fees were obviously a little bit on hold. Our wastewater or water and wastewater charges, obviously, if you notice, have went up by 515K. This is primarily a positive result of COVID. As more people stayed at home, we had a dry summer. People consume more water because they were home. Our financial revenue, you'll notice, was down slightly year over year or under our projected revenue target. That's largely related to the sale of surplus lands. We actually had an aggressive target, but again, with COVID, it slowed down some of our sales or our sales targets for those. Our fines and penalty interest were obviously down again a little bit, but that again is the activities for ticket revenues, bylaws charges, penalties and interest charges. You know, we gave some relief to people with interest charges and such. So we saw a slight decline in there. And our taxation other, which includes supplementary property taxes, increased quite a bit. And that's just really related to the land and the land usage and the land improvements that people did over the last year. It was lower. We anticipated lower than estimated revenue, and it obviously increased slightly a bit. If you go down, moving from this slide on Appendix A, you'll notice there's a difference between our revenue and our expenditure lines. We didn't include any they're called transfers or interfunctional revenue transfers. Those are transfers in and out of accounts to right size accounts where money's coming in, say for a grant, are going into a reserve fund or other sorts. I thought it would be a bit confusing, but those, you'll notice the difference. Our net revenue is slightly over $1 million. On here, it's 1.9 million, and that's because there was 870K in interfunctional revenue transfers. Next slide, please. As indicated in the prior slide, you'll see water is up year over year. This can be attributed to greater number of people staying home in a dry summer. User fees are down slightly, but it was expected as many of our programs were on hold. The grants doubled what we expected. The Safe Restart grant made up for any program shortfalls due to COVID. Our financial revenue, we had delayed sales of properties, so that made us go a little bit down. Our taxation other, as I said earlier, was supplementary property assessments, which gave us a positive result on our revenues. So with that, I'm going to turn over the rest of the slide presentation to Terry Truala, my great colleague.
We can go on to the next slide there. So we have our year-to-date actual expenses for year over year. The first one is the compensation. It actually came in under what our budget was. We had a lot of delays and postponements for hiring due to COVID. For operational services and supplies, it came in under budget as well. Although we had pressures related to COVID, there was a significant project that had to be deferred also because of COVID, which ended up having that line in a savings. The other ones were all relatively on target. The administrative, again, there were some pressures due to COVID. There was also savings related to training, mileage, various expenses such as that were deferred or canceled due to COVID. The equipment, we still had a lot of the operations that we needed to do with the technology. There was also pressures related to COVID on the technology line. So that's the impact for those. Utilities, we saw savings. Our arenas weren't being used as much as we normally do. So those had savings. And then our financial expenditures was over what we had anticipated. And those are largely beyond our control, as it's a lot of that's related to appeals for property assessments and write-offs related to those. So overall, we did come in under budget, again, mostly due to expenses that had to be deferred due to COVID. You can flip to the next slide though. And as you can see, year over year, it's for the most of them, it was in line with what we saw in previous years. You can go to the next slide, Erin. So wanted to touch on our reserves and our reserve funds. As you've heard, every year when KPMG brings our financial statements, we do have very healthy reserves and reserve funds, but many of our funds have been set aside for specific purposes, and we're actually seeing some of those projects come to fruition. But we're going to be undertaking over the next few months a third-party review of our policies, thresholds, and the various benchmarks we have for reserves and reserve funds. And there's three major reasons for that. And we just want to make sure that there's sufficient liquidity in our reserves in order to fund the short-term objectives. We want to make sure that there's a safe and stable source of funds for our projects. And we also want to make sure that our reserves are properly invested in order to give us adequate returns. So as you can see on this one, for our discretionary reserves, we had more spent than what came in, but as I mentioned, that's due to the approved projects going forward that we've been anticipating. You can move to the next one, please, Erin. Just some of the year over year comparisons. As you can see, the biggest decline is in our water mains and also our sanitary sewers as well. And there are just a lot of major projects going on. The Frisian neighborhood water main upgrades was a pretty significant one, as well as the very highly public water meter project that's being funded as well. And for the most part, the other ones are in line with what we saw last year. These ones are the discretionary ones, which are a little bit more open to council discretion on spending which projects. Erin, if you want to flip to the next one. We also have non-discretionary reserve funds. Those are ones that have additional external restrictions placed on the use of those funds. The main one that we have is our development charges. Those need to be spent in line with the Development Charges Act, as well as the development charges town study that we bring forth to council. In addition, there's also our federal gas tax, and the federal government puts restrictions on that. It needs to go towards infrastructure renewal or asset management, capacity building, those sorts of things. Council still approves the use of them. It's just there's more restrictions around what they can be used for. In this case, there's not as much of a decrease because we are getting significant receipts on it. As you can see, we received 6 million. The approved utilization was 7 million, and that has to do with all of the building activity that's going on with it. If you want to switch to the next slide, Erin. And again, that's the comparison of year over year. The development charges, we did use more than we brought in, but it's pretty on par. And the building permit fees, that's another one. That one was a significant increase this year. It's a very tiny chart, but it is a pretty big increase there for that one. But otherwise it's pretty stable for the other ones. You can move on to the next slide. So all of those reserves and reserve funds, as well as some capital levy, goes towards our capital projects, all of which get approved by council on an annual basis, as opposed to the operating budget, which is an annual. A lot of the capital projects are multi-year. Sometimes we even add different phases onto them and they just keep going. So we thought we would give a little highlight. There were 33 capital projects that finished in 2020. Amounting to about 11.7 million in actual expenditures, but we still have 89 capital projects that are either commencing in 2021 or ongoing from prior years. And there's a variety of reasons for them. Some of them are just they're substantial, so they take a little bit longer. Some of them are already substantially complete. For example, the museum and our alarm system modernization. And we don't close off capital projects until they're 100% finished. So those are a couple of examples of ones that are very close, but just not quite.
Tracy or Terry, sorry, I'm being signaled by by Devan that we need a extension to your presentation. So we're going to need a motion to do that.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair McPherson. So the motion will be that council extends the presentation time until complete. And if we could just show a raise of hands, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the next slide is actually just the next steps, which is for council to receive and file the information that were presented. We're going to bring back, so these are the preliminary. We are still finishing up our year-end procedures, but we'll bring the audited financial statements in July 2021. We're also going to be starting with Q2 2021, doing our in-year update to council. And we'll bring the Q2 and we'll bring a Q3. And then to finish up, our CAO, Mike Kirkopoulos, he just wanted to round out the presentation with a few brief comments.
Thanks, Terry, and through you, Mr. Chairman. My comments really are going to focus on, I think, some of the highlights that both Terry and Lauren spoke to, and that really is, I think COVID has impacted last year and will continue to impact this year for us. It's been a challenging year. As council will recall, we did receive COVID funding, which I think was very timely and very helpful for us last year. We are in a surplus position. We remain in a strong financial position, and I think you've heard that from both Lawrence and Terry, and you're going to hear that from our auditors in terms of KPMG when they go forward. I do want to acknowledge in my closing comments earlier around the staff effort that we put forward this past year. As council will know, we froze a lot of positions. There were a lot of vacancies throughout the year in numerous departments, whether we delayed hiring people or just kind of slow played the hiring of people, really to ensure those positions were needed and to ensure our financial position was strong. So we did freeze positions. I think that's an important message. We still managed the budget and we still managed within budget. I'll highlight that, yes, we spent some overtime, but staff rolled up their sleeves. We did a lot more work with a lot less staff this past year, and it was an anomaly, and COVID definitely played into that. So those are my comments, and look forward to the questions council may have.
Terry, is that it for the presentation? Okay, very good. So I will then open it up for council for your comments and questions. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know nobody wants to be first, but I will jump in. I've got two questions. The first is probably to Lawrence. Just wondering, again, as part of last year's budget, we did have a number of contingency funds set aside for some of the capital projects. Wondering if, as part of that July 2021 update, we are going to be getting, could we get an update on how those contingency funds were either spent or not spent? And I know that, again, with COVID, a number of the costs went up associated with a number of projects. So I'm sure that, again, wherever that money went, if we did spend it, it went to good use. But just wondering, because I know it was a sensitive issue at the time, if we can just get a recap on that somewhere down the road. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sorry. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Russell, certainly we can definitely do that. I have to go back and reconcile to see what the $1 million of projects you're referring to, see which ones are closed, which ones are still active. And I'm sure we can come up with a list of which projects have closed, how much contingency was spent, how much was saved, and where the monies went. In general, the savings would be returned to the source that they came from, but happy to provide that in the July update. And I look forward to it.
Thank you, Lawrence. One more question, Mr. Chair. Through you, probably to either Lawrence or to Terry. Going to page 35 on the presentation, or sorry, 35 in the package, page 9 on the presentation, where it talks about the discretionary reserves. Again, we've got the CIP reserve fund in there, and again, it looks like we used up about 330,000 or so, or a third of it. Just wondering, will we get an update on how those funds were allocated? Were they allocated to developments, or were they allocated to like upgrades within the community to independent businesses?
To Director Wagner.
I would have to actually look into that. I don't have the details at hand unless Terry does at this point in time. It's something that if we can't dig up tonight, happy to report back as well to council on those and where the monies went to spend on those projects.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. To Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you very much, Chair McPherson. Through you to Mr. Wagner. Just question around taxation other. Seems like a significant number. Surely when budgeting, this is not a number that is a surprise of any sort. Is there any way, do we consider that in our budgeting? To me, 300,000 or so is a significant number when it consider being called up.
Ooh, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Mikulik. That includes supplementary property taxes, and it's, I guess you would say it's more of a catch basin for a group of revenues. It's tough to nail down because that's based on activities of land improvements or changes to the land and land usage. It's tough to dictate when somebody's going to make a change to the land and when it will get reassessed. So I'd have to look back historically to see what we've done year over year, but I think with COVID and with the events of 2020 and 2019 leading into 2020, it exacerbated or accelerated some of those taxes that we didn't necessarily expect to see a positive gain from. But I'd have to do a little bit more digging into that for you.
Appreciate that response. I see, Terry, do you have?
Yeah, through the chair. So we do have a number to go by when we do the budget, but as Lawrence was mentioning, it's really just an estimate. It all depends on impact. When they tell us their goal for the following year is to complete this many assessments, but it is completely dependent on when they actually finish their initial reviews, and then they have to send us the paperwork. They've made a concerted effort in 2020 because they put a freeze on the property assessments that was originally gonna happen. they had a lot of time to actually get caught up on some of the other supplementary bills. So MPAC themselves actually did do a pretty hard push to try and get a lot of those assessments in. They're still not 100% up to date, but it really was a bit of a unique year, which has caused that huge overage.
Thank you very much. If I may, one more question through you, Chair McPherson, to Mr. Wagner. In the future, I do appreciate the year over year. How much difficult would it be to get receive more than 2 years worth of information in order for us to identify trends?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Mick, I don't think that would be very difficult at all to define trends. I think trends are very important because then you can remove anomalous or statistically abnormal data. So we'd be happy to provide you more of those longer term views. Maybe perhaps we can consider a 3-year rolling average as well. So you can actually, it moves along with the progress and you can see how that's trending over a 3-year cycle and then the individual slices. So let me take that away, and I definitely think we can do something more along the lines of what you're requesting.
That would be fantastic. I think it's a terrific report. I like the way it's been displayed. I like the way you presented it, both you and Terry. And if I could see some trends, that would be fantastic in the future. Thank you.
In addition to that, Councilor Mikulak, that discussion, we've had that Vice Chair Russell and myself have had that conversation with Director Wagner, and understanding that there's a lot of work to get to even this report that has happened in the last couple of months to provide us, in my recollection, the first time I've seen a comparison to budget in the 7 years that I've been on council. So great question, and it is absolutely a worthwhile endeavor to be looking at trends, and it will come, as Councilor Wagner Director Wagner has mentioned. If there's no further questions, I do have a couple of things, and I wonder, Lawrence, if you wouldn't mind expanding a little bit on the process that we're going to undertake with regards to reserves, and specifically, how is council connected in with that look, with that evaluation, with setting those targets, that type of thing?
Well, we're in the process right now of we're out on bids and tender. We're sourcing out a potential vendor to look at our reserves, to look at our level of reserves, to look at our internal processes of how we set reserves, how we close reserves, to look at our current documentation on how we track our reserves. They'll also look at providing advice on, as Terry mentioned earlier in the presentation, on investment of reserves. So we're ensuring that the reserves are not just for today, but for future. They'll look to make sure that we're compliant with municipal act legislation or act requirements. They'll compare us with benchmarking other jurisdictions and similar types of municipalities to ensure that we can, we're not only plan for the short term, but for the longer term. So once we found a vendor that we seem to think can meet our requirements, that obviously are cost effective, that can deliver on all fronts, we plan to have an initial kickoff meeting. In 3 weeks in, we'll probably re-engage with the GBNF committee to talk about their project plan and schedule. 1 month in, I've asked them to present a summary of findings, which hopefully, ideally, we can share with GBNF and potentially council. 1.5 months in, another progress update or status update. 2 months in, they'll present us a draft report, policies and presentations, and that will be also going to the General Business and Finance Committee for review, for comments, and potentially circulation with the rest of council. Finally, 3 months in, the final report and presentation to council. That's our tentative plan. Obviously, we'll see what kind of bids we get in. The good thing is we have 1, 2, 3 so far that have actually looked or downloaded the documents. Trying to get the 4th one in, which is KPMG, also auditors, to look at potentially putting in a proposal. But I feel comfortable that the work that they generate will serve the town for the longer term. But that's our tentative plan, just a high level view of what we've asked them to look at. And obviously we'll be seeking council feedback or input along the way.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you. And again, thank you for this report. I look forward to probably quarter 2 and more importantly, quarter 3 as we move down the road of spending for 2021 versus the 2021 budget. So that I think will set us up very nicely for the budget deliberations in November, December. So thank you again. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councilor Reimer that we receive and file the 2020 year-end financial report. I now ask our clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Councillor Bernay?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Micklick?
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor Rajima?
Yes.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor Timmers?
Yes.
And Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you, Chair. That carries.
There being no additional reports to consider for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda, we have now concluded the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We will now rotate to allow Councilor and Chair J.D. Pachariva to assume the chair at this time for the Community Services and Infrastructure Development Committee agenda. Councilor.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. There are no registered delegations this evening for Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. Got a phone ringing in the background here. Sorry about that. We are now considering item 7.2, the consent agenda, inclusive of item 7.2.1, Active Transportation Citizen Advisory Committee, minutes of January 28th, 2021. And item 7.2.2, Active Transportation Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of February 25th, 2021. Would any member of council like to remove one of these items for the consent agenda to discuss? There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell. The council receive and file for information under consent agenda inclusive of item 7.2.1, Active Transportation Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of January 28th, 2021, and item 7.2.2, Active Transportation Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of February 25th, 2021. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call it the vote.
Thank you, Chair Pachariva. Councillor Bernay?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Micklick?
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor Rajima?
Yes.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor Timmers?
Yes.
And Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.1, Public Works Project Update Report Q1 2021. Our Director of Public Works will be providing a presentation regarding this report. Mr. Dave Graham, would you please go ahead? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of council, for giving me the opportunity tonight to provide a brief presentation on the Public Works project update for Q1 of 2021. Next slide, please. So I thought it was important to highlight how our 2021 work plan aligns with council's strategic priorities in some very key areas. So number one is a connected community. So really important here, integrated mobility and active transportation network. And resilient community. So we want to promote a healthy and safe community, responsible and sustainable financial management with our asset management planning, and adapt and respond to a changing climate. Next slide, please. So this particular slide here provides a dashboard summary of our work plan. And as you can see, we have a significant amount of projects on the go right now. And there's a pretty good balance when you look at the bottom left of the screen there between our transportation capital projects and our environmental safety capital projects. And again, our transportation capital projects are really those projects that are roads, bridges, and sidewalks. And when we talk about our environmental and safety capital projects, we're really referring to our water, wastewater, storm drainage, and environmental type capital projects. And over on the right-hand side of the screen there, again, it shows the significant investments that the town is making in our capital infrastructure. Next slide, please. So Public Works project update for Q1 of 2021. The main focus priority for Q1 has really been, staff's been working really hard to get the project work started. We've been preparing and issuing construction tenders to issue those to the construction market early. We've also been developing and issuing key study and design RFPs to the market, and improving resident communication and engagement in 2021 on key projects, and that's using our new Speak Up Lincoln platform. Next slide, please. So in terms of transportation, just a couple highlights for Q1 of 2021 I'd just like to flag here. So Jordan Village Improvement Project, again, really exciting project. We received budget approval in Q1. We've started with resident and business engagement. That's been started and is currently ongoing. And we're also started the contractor pre-qualification process for the project. When we look at Rittenhouse Road reconstruction, the culvert upgrade for the Prudence Creek erosion and flood control stormwater outlet environmental assessment study. So we completed the virtual public information center end of February of the first quarter. And the Beansville Truck Bypass implementation study has been progressing well in Q1. Next slide, please. So in terms of environmental and safety, some highlights from Q1. The Frisian neighborhood phase 2 water main replacement project. So we've got that tender out and awarded. Construction's probably starting end of this month. In terms of Queen Street, the sewer upgrade project, again, that was tendered and awarded, and we're looking at starting that project with mobilization starting next week. Shoreline protection, Lakeshore Roads west of Martin Road North EA study. So this is a very important project for the town to develop a long-term comprehensive plan. Focusing on adaptation, transportation, and asset management, along with public consultation. So this is a study. So over Q1, we developed the terms of reference for the Schedule C EA study for this. And this particular item is actually included later on in our agenda tonight to look at awarding that RFP. Next slide, please. So to focus, to give some focus and outlook as we are now in Q2 and what to expect throughout the Q2 quarter, we're going to continue to issue construction tenders such as the First Avenue water main replacement and road rehabilitation, Rittenhouse Road reconstruction, Prudence water main upgrade, and the Jordan Village Improvement Project. And we're also going to continue to work on detailed design projects and studies throughout Q2. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity to give you the presentation tonight, and happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Do we have any questions from members of committee? Councillor McPherson, you lead us off, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be very brief. Thank you, Dave, for the presentation and for the report. I'm going to go right to the Prudence water main upgrades, and it certainly looks like construction is going to start this summer. Can you speak to that, please?
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor. Yes, we're anticipating tendering that project in May and awarding that early summer. So I would anticipate pending tender results and contractor scheduling. We'd like to be in a position that project would probably start more late summer. That's kind of what we're anticipating with the approvals, but.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, is it the west side of Jordan Road or the east side of Jordan Road?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, it's a bit of a combination, councillor, in terms of the alignment. I know it's starting on the west side and it'll be on the west side for the most part of Jordan Road, but it does transition to the other side as well. So I can provide more detail on that if you'd like, but
that'd be good. That'd be good to know. And then okay. Will you carry on right through to the Prudence property this year?
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor. So the Prudence water main, the scope of work is basically we're starting the water main work on Jordan Road at 4th Avenue. We're heading north all the way down Jordan Road until we come under the QEW, and then we're heading along the North Service Road to the Prudence property. So I'm not sure if we'll be in front of the Prudence property end of the year. It depends on how progress goes, but the scope of the work definitely will have that in it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor McPherson. Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Graham, Director Graham. Maybe a silly question. Do we have any projects, because COVID, the onset of it started early in last year, do we have any projects from 2019 that have yet to be started or have not been completed?
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor, do you mean 2020 or?
Well, there are several projects from 2020, but I'm closing. I'd like to close off 2019 in my book.
Right.
That was 2 years ago, Councillor McCulloch.
2 years ago, that's right.
We're in 2021.
You're right, but I'm just conferring about 2019.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor. I know in terms of last year, 2020, our Conkle Creek project, we had to that had to get delayed as we wanted to have that completed last year, but with COVID and the pandemic issues with supplies of wood materials and fencing, we couldn't get that project completed last year. So we're carrying that one forward into this year. Also, our metering program, that also is being carried over a little bit. We're 99% done, but it's almost complete as we head into 2021.
Okay, so back to my original question. 2019, all the projects in 2019, they were all completed and closed.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe for the most part, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I see no further discussion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Njima. The council receive and file for information the Public Works Update Report Q1 2021. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to call it the vote. And you're on mute, Devan.
Oh man, thank you, Chair.
It's okay.
Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor McVick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariba,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.2, report PW 14-21, the Beansville Truck Bypass Implementation Study Update. Do members of committee have any questions? Councillor Bernay.
Thank you, Pat Shariva. So through you, I'm very pleased to see that the study is making good progress. I know that staff is moving it forward, and that council, we have made this a huge priority, a high priority to bring this final recommendation to council. So I'm wondering through you, Chair, you know, we just saw in Director Graham's update for all the projects that the sign policies and the noise impact and the stakeholder engagement will take place in Q2. But I'm wondering through you, Chair, maybe to the CAO or Director Graham, if we could confirm when, you know, we can expect that this will be a final report coming back to council. What type of time frame do we anticipate we're looking at?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Bernay. So staff's goal right now is to get a final report, draft report with recommendations back to council, probably July, August. That's our time frame right now. That's our goal, to get that back to council.
Okay, thank you, Director, for that. Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could continue.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Bernay.
So, you know, we all know that, you know, the long-term solution for the new truck road is many down the road to bring the Niagara Escarpment Crossing, you know, road in Grimsby. So, you know, we've said as a council, it's been our priority. The short-term solution is this bypass. We all know there's many moving parts, and especially involving the region with the design and funding, which could take some time before we can, you know, get these upgrades all in place. So through you, Chair, I'm wondering, again, through either the director or to the CAO, you know, have we thought, is there an opportunity for us to be looking at phases or stage opportunities to get, you know, these trucks using some sort of a bypass prior to the day when we're going to see all these upgrades take place, so that we can, you know, be listening to our residents, you know, that have really been quite vocal for the 2 terms that I've been around, to get trucks out of our downtown core and turning and stop them from going down Ontario Street. Is there an opportunity for us to look at a phased approach or a staged opportunity to do this prior to, you know, the day when we're going to get all this done? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Bernay, a great question, and yes, absolutely. We are looking at opportunities on how we can, you know, phase and stage this work. We're looking at that with our consultant and with the region to see, you know, what can be staged and, you know, what we can do concurrently as we're looking at more overall comprehensive upgrades. And when we report back to council, you know, midsummer, we'll be able to provide that information in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Director Graham. And finally, Chair Pat Shariva, I just have one comment and then a final question. So I think it's kind of ironic that it's almost 2 years to the day, April 15th, 2019, that this council passed a motion with a resolution on truck traffic and identifying several action items. So I think the truck bypass, at least in my opinion, and I hope my colleagues agree with me, I think we almost see weekly throughout the community that we have people, especially people that are moving to the community, new residents, that are saying, you know, one of the things that they see, and again, these are new residents to the community that are seeing development popping up everywhere, and they're asking the question, are we keeping up with our infrastructure as we develop? So I think it's very timely on the 2-year anniversary of that motion and that resolution that this council brought forward that we take the time to reflect and communicate with our residents, through our new portal, through our new Speak Up Lincoln, just exactly what we're doing is bypass, because people are asking what the hell is going on. I think we need to communicate. I think we need to be open and transparent as to what we're doing. We're taking this very seriously, but results are not being seen. So I think this is a perfect opportunity, through you, Chair, to either the CAO, to our communications team, that this is a perfect opportunity for us to reflect and communicate to this community, the entire community, what we're doing as a council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bernay. Councillor Manchima, you are up.
Thank you, Chair Pastoriva. And thank you to Director Graham for the report. This Councillor Russell and I have a ward meeting coming up this Thursday, and Ontario Street runs right through our ward, and it also runs through King Street runs through Ward 2. And anyways, this is an issue that's important to all of council. And as Councillor Bernay said, we've made it a priority to come up with a comprehensive number of items and push forward with them, because it's a huge ball to roll uphill, and we've committed to doing so and to not giving up. So I'm hearing Councillor Bernay asked when a final report for this particular item amongst those, that list of items that we decided we're going to push forward with over time that was in that original motion. So this particular item, we're expecting to receive a final report in the next few months. How often are we expecting to hear a report or an update on all of the items in that agenda or in that original motion that we've committed to?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor. So we definitely want to be providing regular updates to committee. I think what our goal would be as a minimum quarterly. We want to provide updates to committee on that, and as well be sharing as much information as we can on Speak Up Lincoln, for example, as well.
Yeah, that would be a great source of information. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Pastoriva. To Dave, Mr. Graham, and Mr. Neubauer, great report. I know this is a study at this point. I'm curious about page 82 in the report that shows the different routes. So the restricted truck routes. I'm just wondering, those both being region roads, is the region on board with those becoming restricted truck routes, and how will that be enforced? I imagine signage, but how will we enforce trucks from going along there? What will we be doing to, I know we want them to be redirected. That's a pretty large restricted area. I'm just wondering how we'll enforce that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Timmers. Yeah, great question. Maybe I'll make a few comments. I don't know if Walter wants to add anything after, but that's one of the initiatives right now that we're currently working on with our project team. And just to highlight as well, the Niagara region is a partner with our study. They're cost sharing on the study, and they're also providing representation on the project team. So we are working collaborative with the Niagara region on this study. So part of what we're looking at right now is developing, what will be our signage strategy and our enforcement strategy to implement the truck bypass in terms of, permissive type truck routes, restricted truck routes and signage, et cetera, and what enforcement is required to properly, manage all that. So that is a huge component of the implementation study that we're currently working through right now. And again, we'll be bringing that information back to council in the final report with a strategy and what that'll look like. But we are looking at a number of options. We're also consulting with other municipalities who have done similar truck route implementations and prohibited and restricted pieces of it. So there's other municipalities that we can learn from as well. have went through this. So.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Timmers. Mayor Easton, your turn. You are on mute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I first want to thank the staff for the approach that they're taking with this report. We're getting more of a focused view of what is involved in all of this project. It's quite substantial. And there are suggestions now that are starting to surface that wouldn't have without this concerted effort. So I really want to thank the staff for the creativity they're putting into this. On page 82, I think the proposed truck routing is one of the most clearly stated intent. It lays things out very, very well in terms of what we would hope to accomplish. And I want to support other comments that have been made, Mr. Chairman, on the whole idea of concurrent actions, on staged actions, on phased actions, and doing that in such a way and documenting it in reports that are highly publicized so that our citizens can see exactly what's happening. And I mean, Mr. Chairman, to include good news and bad news, because we may not be able to do everything. There may be very good reasons why something can't be done. And but we need to tell that story as well. I think that's a level of transparency that people are looking for. And if there are failures, we shouldn't see them as anything but a situation that just can't be mitigated. And that does happen. So I think we've made tremendous progress. It is taking much too long. And so I want to put some pepper behind this, Mr. Graham. I know that you don't need that push, but we really need to come up with some results here for the sake of our citizens who really are looking for results. So July seems to be an awful long way away. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I guess my question really is, what else do you think could possibly happen between now and July that might be some hope, some greater hope for the community that action is going to be forthcoming? What can we do?
Through Mr. Chairman to the mayor, I think definitely what we want to do, as mentioned earlier tonight, is make sure we're communicating what we're doing and what we've done, progress that's been made on this important study. I think that's a great strategy to get that out and make everyone aware of what's currently underway and what's being completed. And like I say, there's still quite a bit of work to get done between now and when we get a report on the agenda. But we're committed to getting a final report back to committee in the summer on this matter, and definitely keep things moving from there forward. In terms of moving to design work, we're also going to be looking at what we can do concurrently with some of this work as well, and be providing that whole work plan. It would be a few comments, Madam Mayor, that I could provide.
All right, I'll live with those for the moment, Mr. Graham. You've spoken a couple of times in the report about, and in other places quite appropriately, regarding the data that's being collected by the region. Can you give us any more information on how that data is going to be brought forward? Do we need to wait until July to find that out? It seemed to me that it was going to be done at the end of Q2, or yes, I believe it was the end of Q2. What can you tell us about that?
Through Mr. Chairman to Madam Mayor. Well, I mean, I guess we could look at, if we have data that, we could provide, in advance of finalizing the study, we'd be happy to take that back to the project team to see, can we provide some more information? If that's something we can do, we definitely will look at trying to do that. I know right now, the project team is working with MTO to acquire a lot of different data sets and using, different innovative smart technology and basically trying to figure out and model truck traffic and figure out patterns of truck traffic, where trucks are coming from, where they're going, the volume of trucks, et cetera on that. So that's really the objective of a lot of the data collection, is to develop a traffic model so we can have a really good understanding of where the trucks are coming from, where they're going, and how that will play into the detour and making the detour a success.
Okay, that makes good sense. Mr. Chairman, do I have another question?
You do, your worship. Last one.
Right. Well, maybe I'm not going to ask any more questions. I'm going to wait and see. Mr. Graham, I have great faith in the work that you and Mr. Neubauer have done on our behalf. I think you really responded to the challenge that we laid out last year. And thank you very much.
Thank you, your worship. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly a big project, lots of moving parts, lots of stakeholders here. I'd just like to comment and was very pleased to see that as part of the work plan that we are going to see a detailed analysis of the issues of trucks bypassing the weigh stations on the QEW. I think that's an important piece here. I'll be interested to see, as it's pointed out in the report, to discuss alternatives for quantifying the number of trucks bypassing the inspection station and develop a list of action items. So very interested in seeing that, as I do believe that's a significant piece of the truck traffic that we're seeing right across Lincoln. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Oh, Councillor Reimer, just in under the wire. Go ahead. Vice Chair Reimer.
Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. I just wanted to pick up on something that Mayor Easton brought up about transparency and about there might be the possibility that sometimes we cannot implement some of these changes or affect change. And I think there are some certain realities that are there that we need to weigh this conversation with. We have been part of a massive construction boom. And when I say massive, the numbers speak to themselves every time we get a report from Andrew Greenaway. The amount of truck traffic that is generated from Cache, from our construction on Lincoln Avenue, from, you take any construction projects in Lincoln the last 3 or 4 years, that's massive. We have 2 large quarries, aggregate producers on the top of our hill of the escarpment, and their traffic that they generate is huge in a certain day. We have a large cement plant on the east side of town. The trucks in and out of there on any day are incredible. We have a vibrant craft beverage, winery, agriculture community. Everything they do is moved on a truck. So we have to remember that when we're beating this drum, which I pick up on truck safety. Truck traffic is one I'm not sure how much effect on change we're going to have. Truck safety is huge to me. But I think we just need to remember that some of those things aren't going to change. And all you have to do is sit beside on a normal day outside of COVID and watch what kind of vehicles go into bench or go into just cooking or go into all the little shops in downtown Beams. Everything comes on a truck. So we just need to, I think, weigh our conversation sometimes about some of that truck traffic is going to be there all the time. The traveling through Mountain Street, Ontario for aggregate is one of those ones that personally myself is I would like this implementation study to address, because I think that's huge. That's a huge safety item. And I think we can implement change there. But the rest of it, east-west routes through Beamsville don't exist because trucks go out to the QEW and go around that way, unless they have business or they're delivering to downtown Beamsville. So just a few comments. Thank you for Chair Pachariva for indulging me.
Thank you, Vice Chair Reimer, and all great questions. And the mayor touched on this earlier, and there was quite a bit of commentary online over the weekend about our infrastructure and the perception that's out there. So I'd like to see Mr. Deanne's face here on the conversation this evening, because I think we need to use our Speak Up Lincoln platform. We need to create a comprehensive communication piece that addresses all of these things, that addresses infrastructure upgrades, that addresses truck safety, that addresses our ward discussions with Mr. Neubauer and Mr. Graham about what we're doing. Everything can't be a secret, and we need to get that message out there. And at the same time, and the mayor touched on this, if something can't be done or something runs amiss, we still have to tell people. Bad news is news, but not telling and not informing the public on what's going on is in my terms not acceptable. So knowledge is key, and the more people that know will be able to spread the word. Mr. Deanne, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva, and all good comments. And I just wanted to quickly jump into to sort of build on what Director Graham had mentioned. Speak Up Lincoln is definitely a great tool that we brought on board to help communicate on a lot of these projects, and this is a great one to do that with. In fact, truck traffic safety or traffic safety is one of the first items that we launched on February 10th when we did launch Speak Up Lincoln. So I'm going to be working closely with Public Works to build up on that and make sure we are communicating this information out. In addition, our ward newsletters, which are coming around the corner, will be a good key item as well to help communicate this out. So all good comments, and I've been fiercely taking some notes, and I'm looking forward to helping getting the word out. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I see no further discussion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik to receive and file report PW 14-21 Beansville Truck Bypass Implementation Study Update. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Mikulik,
Yes.
Councillor Patrieva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.3, report PW 13-21, 2021 Road Rehabilitation Program Tender Award. Good news story. A lot of work being done in the town. Even in spite of COVID, we continue to push forward. Do any members of committee have any questions? Okay. There being no, Councillor Rincham.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So great work getting this organized and bringing it forward in a report that's clear to us. It often makes sense to bundle work together to get a better price rather than one-offing them. But this isn't always a particularly popular decision with people in the community that might be waiting to have, for example, their road resurfaced because it's been bundled together with another road to be completed the following season. I see that economies of scale were achieved by bundling the road resurfacing work in the Frisian and the Cedarbrook area. So I'm wondering if anybody has a dollar value that that we can point to demonstrate savings that we would have achieved as a result of committing to economies of scale for these projects.
Mr. Graham, do you want to try to tackle that?
Sure. Thank you. Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor. I don't have a specific dollar value, but what I can tell you confidently that, when you refer to the Frisian neighborhood water main and paving projects, so what we did in our roads rehabilitation and resurfacing program, we had a number of road candidates in there, urban road candidates for hot mix resurfacing. That's how they were funded by the annual roads program. So we included those roads in the water main tender on nearby streets to take advantage of economies of scale. And so what we found by doing that is our asphalt pricing, I want to say, came in a range probably 18 to 20% cheaper. So that was the savings, which is a significant savings on this type of work. And really, you know, it results in you're saving a lot more money because you're not having contractors mobilize all different locations at different work sites. So when they come in to do that water main replacement on Frisian Avenue or Frisian Phase 2, Cedar Brook, Green Meadow area, they're going to be there and they're going to be paving there. So it makes a lot of sense to leverage that mobilization cost and you know, pave roads in the area when they're there. And with larger quantities in some of the contract tenders, you get better pricing as well. So there is a lot of advantages of doing that. So I would say we have a savings of, say, 18 to 20% from what we would have typically expected.
So a question of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So what do you think a dollar value on that 18 to 20% would be, roughly? I'm just trying to demonstrate it for people that, as I said earlier on, some people, you know, they clearly see the advantage. And of course, there's an advantage to saving money. But I just want to, you know, it's a balance. And I just would like to demonstrate that for anybody that might be watching, that might be thinking, you know, took you a little while to do my road. Why?
Through Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, well, if the Frisian water main, replacement and paving project with all the economies of scale built into it, you know, let's say the overall project was, you know, budget wise was say 1.7 million. So, you know, we're into, you know, probably like $240,000 if you use 20% in that range.
See, that's significant. That's quite
300,
significant.
Dave, 340.
Or I meant, yes, sorry, 340.
Quite all right.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's
Well,
okay.
that's good.
Thanks
Yeah.
for.
No. That's okay.
Yeah.
We used to get those quizzes before you had calculators and at the store.
Yeah.
Something's 3 for $99. What's one? So.
Yeah. Both of those numbers are big figures, and I appreciate hearing that. That really makes it pretty clear. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Councillor. That's a direction we gave to Mr. Graham and Mr. Neubauer a number of years ago. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding on the cost savings, you know, 20%, and we're able to stretch these dollars and we're able to do work and pretty much complete a quadrant. So we just need to do a better job of getting that message out, because last year there was a bit of a ball of confusion in that neighborhood with restoration work, and then we were going to come back and pave it, that it was in 2 phases. So Councillor Bernay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Patriba. Just, you know, while we're on, you know, the comment that Councillor Rinjema had brought up with regards to bundling, I really wanted to make a comment with regards to Director Graham and looking at new and innovative technologies. In 2020, you know, we had some discussions with regards to looking at things through a different lens. I think, honestly, if we're honest with ourselves, for a long, long time in Lincoln, we've looked at things, you know, using the shave and pave and the tar and chip. And I really want to, you know, Director Graham is too humble to really make a comment. So I just want to thank him for leading the charge along with his staff in 2020 to reaching out to the HCARN people, who are the leaders in Niagara for road construction, and actually sending his staff out to different projects to look at different methods of road resurfacing. And you know, this is really coming to light in this package that we're putting out. And I'm wondering, Director Graham, if I could put you on the spot for a minute, if you could comment for those at home and even for the rest of council, if you could just comment on what we're going to do differently, outside the box thinking on 13th Street and on First Avenue in Vineland. I think that's something that we should be communicating through you, Chair, Director Graham, if you could please.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Bernay, and thank you for your comments, Councillor. Yes, so just as an update, in terms of 13th Street in Jordan, between 4th Avenue and King Street, this year we're going to be piloting, it's called a bonded wearing course strategy. So what we're looking at doing there, in lieu of conventional surface treatment, for example, we're going to be putting a thin layer of asphalt on the roadway as our final wearing course. So we want to try that and pilot that technology. And we're going to be using recycled asphalt product as well to build the road, the base of that road, to make it stronger in comparison to maybe using granular materials. And again, we're looking at different sustainable ways of using recycled products, recycled asphalt, recycled materials in some of our projects. So that is a pilot program that we're going to be doing this year on 13th Street. And some of the objectives coming out, we're looking at different life cycles of the different work we're doing. So we want to try some different technologies and look at, where we can extend life cycles for the investments we're making. We also had a lot of feedback from the Active Transportation Committee in terms of on some of our key cycling routes, looking at smoother surfaces and the different technologies around that. So we're going to be piloting that on 13th Street. Upcoming as well in a future tender, we're looking at rebuilding First Avenue with the water main replacement project, and we're looking at different pavement technology there as well to use. So we are looking at some different pilots as we look at this year's projects in terms of road resurfacing and rehabilitation technology. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Councillor Bernay, are you good?
All good, Chair. Thank you, Director Graham.
Thank you, Councillor Bernay. And again, you know what? Kudos to both Mr. Neubauer and Mr. Graham. Implementing these new technologies into a tender like this not only brings innovation to your department and the town, but it also gives a lot of credence to our citizen advisory committees. They're the front end of this, and they bring up these suggestions, and you implement them into your work plans. You know what? It validates their work. It gets them excited, and we saw that today too with the announcement on the accessible funding that we received for a bunch of work throughout the town. And hats go to the Age Friendly Committee and the Joint Accessibility Committee for making the recommendations on that. So thank you very much, Mr. Graham and Mr. Neubauer. If you were standing, I would ask you to take a bow, because it's yeoman's work, and very proud of both of you. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Bernay. Receive and file report PW 13-21 regarding the 2021 Road Rehabilitation Program Tender Award, and approve the contract award for the 2021 Road Rehabilitation Program tender to Norjohn Contracting and Paving Limited for the amount of $1,430,000, $399.65, as outlined in the report. I better read that again. $1,430,399.65. Approve the mayor and town clerk to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call it the vote.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Miklick,
Yes.
Councillor Patrieva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.4, report PW 15-21, Lakeshore Road and Shoreline Improvements Environmental Assessment Project Award. Do members of committee have any questions? Councillor Bernay.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Jillian Harris. I have two questions with this report. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Harris. I wonder, Jillian, I'm seeing that we had this project budgeted for $550,000. It's coming in at $862,000. It's a fairly hefty 60% increase from our budget. I'm wondering if you could comment on factors that have contributed to the increased costs.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are a few factors that contributed to the increased cost. So the first one is right now, just due to the projects that are coming out, some stimulus funding that's coming out, and then because a lot of projects in other municipalities were deferred to 2021, the market is fairly flooded for consultants. So I have been speaking with colleagues in the industry across Southern Ontario, and they are starting to see that proposal costs are coming in higher than anticipated. So that's one portion of the increased cost coming in. There also is an additional item to this scope, which was a public outreach component geared towards communication materials for the residents in and around not just the lake, but also near our rivers and streams, to provide some information on flood prevention, planning during flood events of the sort. A number of municipalities have documents like this, but we added that into the scope as well. And this was not included within the original budget, but was included as an item within our the grant application that we submitted, and one of the deliverables that would be required with it. And then lastly, the additional supporting studies that were required. So there's two portions that contribute to the additional cost within this area. Part of it was increased cost due to the tight schedule associated with the funding that we have applied for. Normally, when you're doing an EA, you might be able to screen out some options and reduce the total area that you'd have to do some of these additional studies. But because we do have a tight window and need to do it over a single timing window for some of the vegetation, migratory birds, spawning seasons, things like that, unfortunately, it increases. It does increase some of those studies there for that. And then the other portion is that from when we prepared the budget to now, just as part of the EA process, and then also associated with soils, there were two smaller studies that we didn't include within that original budget that will need to be done at this point.
Thank you to the Manager of Environmental Services. Thank you, Jillian, for that comment. Through you, Chair, if I could just ask one other question. Jillian, one of the other things that jumped out me on this report was it indicated that we had 11 firms that actually drew plans on this, and yet only 2 submitted. I'm wondering, do we typically, when that happens, that's quite a large number of firms drawing plans with only 2 submitting. Do we follow up with those firms to determine why they did not submit, to understand the reason for them not following through? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We do follow up, and on this situation, because of the size of the scope itself, and then the specialization with the shoreline itself, a number of those 11 firms either wouldn't be large enough to submit on their own, or would have to team. So the 11 may have narrowed down to 4 to 6 total submissions in an ideal world. During the bidding process, we did have a couple that did reach out to us and advise that they wouldn't be submitting because they couldn't get some of these smaller ones, they couldn't get a partner that had available workload capacity to be able to submit, and said that they'll be keeping an eye out for future studies within town to be able to submit for, but they just wouldn't be able to submit for this one. And then after it closed, we did actually follow up with a number of the firms that did pull the documents, again, just because we only had the 2 submissions, and we wanted to get confirmation of why we did only receive the 2. And all of them responded back that it was tied to workload and their capabilities. And then within those abilities within the tight timelines. So again, if we were able to extend it out over multiple years, they might have been able to shift workloads or shift resources around to be able to support it. But because we are trying to get this done in a tight window, they didn't have the capacity to be able to submit.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jillian. I appreciate those responses.
Thanks, Councillor Brunei. Councillor Mikluck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Jillian Harris. So listening to that, based on that discussion, is there any advantage to possibly save money by deferring this and waiting till next year when there may be more consultants available at our disposal?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, every year that we continue to delay, the prices are increasing, and we are seeing that year over year, even in the individual studies. And from my time in consulting, you do see each of those continue to increase. So we wouldn't necessarily we might save a little bit on what we have from a bit of a flooded market, but based off of how funding's coming out as well, we would have to extend for a longer period of time to be able to realize a market that's not flooded for consultants. And then also you have the risk of additional potential damage to the shoreline from the various impacts that are had, which increases the construction cost later. So in your long-term life cycle cost, that'd be increased. And then if we delayed, we would not be eligible for the funding the funding options that we have available to us right now.
Okay, thank you for that response. And then the original question I had my hand up for was with regards to what looks like a staggering number, the $50 to $60 million, the recommendations from this. Do we have that? Last I recall in our short and long-term budgeting, I don't recall there being funds directed towards, I didn't recall any $50-60 million in the long-term funding for these sort of projects. Do we have that earmarked, or are we thinking about that down the road? Like this, there's this report or this process that we're going through. We want to actually fulfill, or we want to actually implement some of the recommendations. So do we have that forecast in the future?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the important thing to note first would be that the EA that we're identifying to submit would support future grant applications, which would provide funding opportunities. As for the earmarking of funds and how that gets allocated, I'm going to pass on to our Director of Finance and our Treasurer to answer that question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Mikluck. Yes, so as soon as we would have any kind of estimate or costing for some of the enhancements or the improvements recommended, we'd have to look at issuing debentures or looking at, as Jillian mentioned, grant funding or other associated fundings to support these. And all of these would be prioritized and staged out over multiple years. So until we have the wide swath of costing and projects that are potentially there, it's hard to say what sources or where you would get the available funding, but we would definitely come back with a plan once we have a little bit more line of sight on the potential costs.
I appreciate that answer. It's just, you know, when we talk about long-term construction costs, estimated at 50-60 million, and I appreciate the, you know, the need for this sort of study to receive the grants, but the money also has to be spent in some way to receive a portion of funding from the various levels of government. So as long as we are considering that with our long-term budgeting, that we're actually going to be doing something, or we're budgeting for doing something, that's what I just want to ensure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Councillor Mikluck, if you remember, you know, the last number of years at AMO and Roma Ogra, we've had delegations asking for this because there's no way a municipality of our size can take on a project of this extent. So, and staff has applied twice for the disaster mitigation relief fund, but didn't get it because the EA was the missing component. So by doing this EA, this will help trigger the different funding levels. It's already been passed through the provincial government onto the federal. So this is like a framework for allowing us to do the work, to get some funding from the upper levels of government. And again, like a lot of these projects, we'll have to put in, a certain amount, looking to provincial and federal funding, and then that will be drawn out and spread over a time frame. So, thank you, Mayor Easton. Go ahead. You're on mute.
I have a mouse that wants to fight with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to be very careful with my question, but if I don't put it in here and allow you to give it some direction, I don't know where I would be able to ask it. So what we have here is a recommendation that we approve a company to provide engineering services, and that's great and it's clear. And I think the reasons why the costs are as high as they are pretty clear as well. However, the question that I have is, have we established as a council whether or not we have received the amount of information that we require, not as engineers, but as people that are going to be making decisions on behalf of the community? Do we have all the information that we need on the history behind the erosion along the lakeshore, and some of the history behind that, some of the extent of that, and what level of decisions that we're going to be expected to make here from a policy perspective, including who's going to pay for this? Because we're talking at one end about road work that needs to be done. We're talking about erosion at the east end of our town, and we're looking at, there's private property, there's public property. When do we have that discussion? Because I think that's missing, and maybe I'll look to Mr. CEO to help us with that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Karkopoulos.
Through Mr. Chairman, and I'll see if either Jillian or Dave have anything to add, but I think the current process that we're undergoing, the EA process, really is the next step in having that conversation with council. It will flush out a number of the items that Mary Easton has highlighted, whether it be costs, whether it be options to consider, whether it be some of the issues that got us to where we are at this particular point. Once that's completed, and once the stage is completed, we'll be back in front of council. And really that is the time, through your chair to the mayor, where we're going to have a lot of those conversations. And council will, at that particular point in time, notwithstanding the success of any government program, have a chance to really weigh in on a long-term funding strategy, on what we want to do or not do in this particular area. And it will lay out a number of factors. I know, again, one of the things that will be part of this conversation is the condition assessment, what was there in the past, and we've got some of that work both through Brock as well as ourselves in terms of some of the work that was done. And so I think we're going to continue to look at where we were, where we are right now, and where we're going to in the future. But that really is the next stage, Mary.
Okay, I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned that the emphasis is on the engineering services, and so I want to make sure that that we have the ability to decide all the different mechanisms that may be used to pay this. Who are all of the stakeholders that need to be involved? And that's the part that I don't understand. And I didn't really see that that would be part of the engineering assessment, Mr. Karkopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I think it's a combination of subspecialties and specialists in a number of areas. I mean, there's Brock studies that have been reviewed and will continue to be reviewed as part of the background. There are, as I said, a number of other specialists that have reviewed those studies and that are going to look at it. And there will be both a planning lens to it, a public consultation lens to it. And I think as we get through the EA, Mary Easton, one of the things we'll be able to answer very specifically is questions around who's paying, who should be paying, Are there other options? I think as innovation continues and as technology continues, maybe the typical format we look at for either shoreline protection or road movement may change. I don't know what comes out of that EA. I don't know what some of the technologies are that are out there, but I think the typical way of doing things may not be what comes to the forefront. It may be at the end of the day, and that'll be a decision council will have to make. But there will be significant public input, significant stakeholder engagement, and I think if there's an opportunity to look at other innovative ways of addressing the problem we have there, ones that may be less cost prohibitive, then we'll definitely do that.
Right. Well, for sure, if we don't approve this tonight, we won't be doing anything, will we? So that's pretty clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Kirkopoulos. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Your Worship. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson. Receive and file report PW 15-21 regarding Lakeshore Roads and Shoreline Improvements Environmental Assessment Project Award, and approve WSP Canada Inc. to be retained to provide engineering services, and approve the mayor and town clerk to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Miklik,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.5, report CS 04-21, 2021 Whipple Trust Fund allocation. Do members of council have any questions? Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Mayor Easton. Receive for information report CS 04-21 regarding the 2021 Whipple Trust Fund allocation, and approve the disbursement of $1,750 from the H.E. Whipple Excess Interest Trust Fund to the two successful applicants as outlined in the report. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the question.
Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Miklik,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.6. Report CS 05-2021, 2021 Grow, Prosper, Belong Community Fund allocation and proposed COVID-19 relief funding. Do members of committee have any questions? Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers. Receive for information report CS 05-2021 regarding the 2021 Grow, Prosper, Belong Community Fund allocation and proposed COVID-19 relief funding, and approve the disbursement of funds in their totality in the amount of $20,200 to the successful applicants as outlined in the report, and direct staff to disburse remaining funds in the amount of $8,550 and any 2021 return funds as one-time COVID-19 relief to community organizations that directly offer sport, recreation, or cultural programs, and social service agencies that provide services to Lincoln residents. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Miklik,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Mayor Timmers, Councillor Timmers, sorry,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider item 7.3.7, report CS 06-21, Award of contract for construction of Rotary Park Phase 2. Our Director of Community Services will provide a few comments prior to members' questions. Ms. McKay, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Great. So we're excited to be bringing this report forward at this time. We know that through the pandemic, there has been definitely a renewed appreciation for our parks. Our parks have become instrumentally important in the health and well-being, both physically and mentally, to our residents. And as usage of these spaces increases, so does demand for creative and innovative features and functionality. And so we are super excited about bringing the recommendation to award this contract for Phase 2 development tonight. We did have a pretty aggressive schedule outlined in our RFP because we wanted to see this project kicked off after council ratified the award and before the end of the good weather, which would be at the end of summer when people could get out and enjoy the new space. So we've put a lot of detail into the report about the proponents and the proposals that were picked up. The consultant who's going to continue on in the project with us and who's worked with us through to this point on the detailed design with our staff team. And we're happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Ms. McKay. Do committee members have any questions? Councillor McLuck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. McKay, just some questions in reading this report from a layman's perspective, like, which myself, I'm reading this as a resident. I just see a lot of consultants. I see that we have a landscape architect. I see that we have a general consultant, LPL, along with sub-consultants, civil engineering, electrical engineering, structural engineering, and irrigational consulting. I'm just curious about the need for so many consultants with this project, and are they all necessary? How are they all necessary to make this project happen?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the consultants that you see listed on the first page of the report are actually the consultants as part of the landscape architectural firm consulting firm. And those consultants were, when we hired landscape planning last year to do the detailed design, they came with their team, and that was their team. So in preparing detailed drawings, and these are complex drawings, we have irrigation, we have electrical, we have engineering. They form that team and they do the detailed design documents that then go out and the contractors then bid on. When we award to a contractor, which we're proposing to do tonight, they come with their own team to actually complete the different aspects of work and each bring their own specialization. So you will have consultants in irrigation, and you will have electrical, and you will have a sub that will do the asphalt and the concrete. So that is how construction projects are done in our parks and in our buildings and in our facilities. And it is a team of consultants that you're really hiring, even though you're identifying the prime that you're hiring, be it the contractor or be it the prime consultant.
I appreciate that response. I just, yeah, it's just, I've heard it in the past with regards to consultants. And, when I see this number of consultants and because I truly feel we have a number of qualified or capable staff members as well. And I want to make sure that they're working alongside on this project, that we're not hiring consultants when we have staff members possibly that are just as qualified, if not more so qualified. That's the area of questioning I'm wandering around. That's the neighborhood I'm wandering around. So thank you for that response.
You're welcome.
Councillor Manchima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm really happy to see that this project is moving forward. It's in our ward. There's a lot of projects going on in 2021. We saw that in the finance director's report earlier on. So congratulations to everyone for pulling this together. And I think the report reflects how well organized this project has been. Maybe a couple of bumps, but what project doesn't have them? So I'd like to talk for a second about the idea that this facility will be, and I'm quoting the area at the end of the report, which is a reference to council strategic priorities. So yeah, so this facility will be a welcome community. It will be as the result of one of our priorities, which says that we want to be a welcoming community, improving, and this project will improve social and economic inclusion by providing friendly and inclusive public spaces that are universally acceptable to facilitate citizen connections and foster vibrant communities. So I want to highlight the word accessible. As the council appointee on the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, because I'm aware, and I've asked this question before, that community service staff and everyone involved in this project did and does consult with the Joint Accessibility Advisory consultants and committee regarding the design of the park. And I'm also aware and very impressed by the request of the Rotary Club that a certain portion of the $100,000 gift it is providing go toward accessible playground equipment. Great things. So I don't have a concern about this park being accessible because I feel confident about that. I feel confident it's going to be accessible for those with physical or mental challenges, because I know that the people involved are keeping the needs of those who are marginalized for various reasons in mind as they go through a design and build of this park. And we've seen this over and over again from staff. I guess I'm just going to suggest that in reports moving forward, I'd like to see that as this project is discussed, that we make sure that we mention accessibility and that we make it clear that when we talk about accessibility, we're talking about accessibility for those with various disabilities that make it difficult for them to participate. So accessibility specifically to people who have disabilities. So my question is, when these reports come forward, can we have some of the language specifically addressing these needs? I think it's going to be exciting to see how the Val Fleming Butterfly Park is going to be beneficial for those with, for example, sight issues or hearing issues. And of course, how those with mobility issues will be able to enjoy it.
We can absolutely, through you, Mr. Chair, we can absolutely continue to include that in our updates.
Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Rensham, I gave you a little bit of latitude there, but you know what? Going on our session we had last week, let's be a little more direct to our questions there. That's more of a soliloquy, and I know you're passionate about it, but take that breath and ask that question. So
understood, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
No worries. So I see no further discussion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer. Receive and file report CS 06-21 regarding the award of contract for construction of Rotary Park Phase 2 and approve the contract award to Stevensville Lawn Services Incorporated in the amount of $2,756,040, excluding HST, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bernay?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miklik?
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor Rajima?
Yes.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor Timmers?
Yes.
And Mayor Easton. Thank you, Chair. That carries.
Thank you, Devan. I get the thumbs up. So that concludes our reports for this evening. There are no confidential items to deal with this tonight. Do we have any further remarks from committee? Councillor McCulloch?
If I may, thank you very much, Councillor Patriva. The remark I want to make is with regards to a phone call that I received from an area resident earlier this week. It's around people throwing waste and garbage out their windows. This is a gentleman that's in his 70s collecting waste in front of his home off of 8th Avenue from Victoria Avenue. So what happens is, and we've done a fantastic job of promoting takeout, supporting local businesses. But what's happening is people are, since COVID especially, they're eating in their cars. And when they eat in their cars, they're driving down major roads and then throwing their trash out on the first side road that's a deserted side road. And this poor gentleman, he is seeing an extraordinary amount, especially this year with COVID. And I was wondering or hoping that we could possibly, through COVID funding or through COVID sources of, ways of mitigating this or helping these folks out that live on these rural roads that are having to pick up basically twice as much trash as they used to. And this particular gentleman, his concern is that the trash is ending up in the water courses and the waterways and going down the streams. And he's rather heartbroken and tired, from cleaning it. And I was wondering if we as a municipality can help out with this, the rural folks in cleaning up the trash.
Thanks, Councillor. I see our CAO, Mr. Kirkopoulos, with his hand up. Mike, go ahead.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. The councillor actually shared that earlier. I think it was either on the weekend or late last week, this actual email. We have received similar ones. I know I've spoken to a few members of council about this particular topic. And so there is a joint public works, community services blitz. Actually spoke with Dave Graham and Dave Warden earlier this morning. And I think there will be some things that we'll be doing this week specifically, but that'll continue over the next number of months. But you can expect this week that we will have students and staff out there cleaning this up. I'd also encourage members of council over the next 24 hours, if you do have other sites, Councillor Mikulik, I'm aware of the sites that you had forwarded and that we had received from that constituent. But if there are some other sites, by all means, please feel free to forward those.
I appreciate that. And I say this publicly because I really want to see the residents or citizens in town make an extra effort, not just during Earth Month or Earth Day, but throughout the year to take pride and to you don't have to. It doesn't have to be your own trash to pick up, but certainly you can keep your own trash and throw it in your own garbage. So that's why I bring that up now. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Councillor Bernay.
Yeah, very quickly, Chair, through you. I just wanted to comment just to bring something to light with regards to our Lincoln Fire Department. So on the weekend, we received an email from Deputy Chief about a traumatic accident that occurred in Jordan on the railway bridge, and it sounded quite serious. Niagara EMS, along with our Niagara Fire and Orange, were involved in going out to an accident. So I reached out to Deputy Chief Blake today, and I guess the good news is that beyond some concussion and some a broken finger, this individual has come through with all his X and CT scans. Is going to be one lucky boy. But I just want to really bring to light, this happens quite regularly where our Lincoln Fire are out in the community, involved in some what could be catastrophic accidents and traumatic situations. And just kudos for all the good work that they did on the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bernay. And I see Mr. Deanny making some notes there. Again, a couple items that we can, use our Speak Up Lincoln for. Again, when we attend AMO, CN has some communication resources available to us to let the public know that, these aren't thoroughfares for using. And to Councillor Mikulik's point, Yeah, the old pitch-in campaign. Earth Day is every day. Love where you live. And it's the same that we see with respect to the poor driving behavior that's exhibited by some of our residents, right? So slowly we've got to change behavior one by one, and it's up to all of us to try to do that. Mayor Easton, you get the last word.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just seeking information from staff. I suppose this would be Mr. Bruder. I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 days that the problem of vehicles being parked on front lawns is just about the worst I've ever seen it. It's becoming extremely unsightly. I know these policies are coming forward. There may have been some public consultation that's required. I'm not sure. So I'm just seeking some information.
Sure, Your Worship. So yeah, we're still going through making some changes or looking at some changes in our overall zoning bylaw, but that's in certain instances where there's a little bit of a discrepancy between what a parking surface is on the front lawn versus what it isn't. But I think, I would also message out that if there is a vehicle actually parked on the front lawn, i.e. parked on the grass, we can do something about that right now. If it's not on a parking area. So that is something we can certainly respond to complaints and address it there. But in terms of, the definition of a parking area and how much of a parking area can be in the front, the frontage versus the front lawn, those are the things that we're still looking at in our zoning bylaw, because that is the mechanism in which it's implemented. And we are going to be coming forward with some public consultation when we have got a working draft that we are comfortable bringing forth to the public. We're just working through a few last minute things.
Okay, I understand. So do you believe that it would be a good idea for us to put a posting on Speak Up Lincoln about actions that that could be taken?
Certainly, Your Worship. I think that's definitely something we can consider. I'll loop back with Director Deanne on that, and maybe we can get something out in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship, and maybe a little proactive enforcement over the weekend when most of this occurs, and maybe an education component first, and then follow up with something after that. So. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 8:57 p.m. Thank you all.